الرحمن الرحيم. طلاب، هاي محاضرتنا اليوم عن الvertebral column. vertebral column أو العمود الفقري، وهو as you know, it is the central part of the bony skeleton. This bony skeleton is supporting the skull and supporting the shoulder girdle, which also support the upper limb. There is a pelvic girdle which attached to the vertebral column and transmit the body weight to the lower limb. As we have know that the vertebral column is supporting and protecting the spinal cord and the spinal nerve, spinal roots. It is composed of, the vertebral column is composed of 33 vertebrae, which is classified or divided into the following: 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, and 5 sacral and 4 coccygeal. The 5 sacral vertebrae fused in one bone, as we called sacrum, and the lower coccygeal vertebrae fused to form a coccyx. There is a joint and intervertebral disc which form 1/4 length of the vertebral column. This is the picture showing the vertebral column, which is articulate with the skull, with the occipital bone, and ending in the coccyx, and articulate with the with the pelvic girdle and the shoulder girdle. The vertebrae are divided to typical and atypical. All of them possess a common pattern. يعني نقول أنه في السيستم كلهم هم الtypical والatypical have the same component or the same parts with some variation. The typical vertebrae composed of rounded body anteriorly, vertebral arch أو القوس الفقري اللي هو posteriorly. The arch is composed of 2 pedicle and 2 lamina and 2 transverse processes and 1 spine posteriorly and 4 articulated processes, 2 of them superior and 2 of them inferior. The pedicle had superior and inferior notch. The inferior notch form the upper vertebra, with the superior notch of the vertebra below form the intervertebral foramina. These pictures of the vertebra, one of them for the cervical vertebra and the other for lumbar vertebra. The third picture is lateral view for a vertebra. As we said before, the vertebra composed of 1 body and 2 pedicles, 2 lamina, 2 transverse, 1 posterior spine and 4 articular cartilage. All of them are pointed and marked in this picture. The lower picture is for cervical vertebra, which is composed of the body and transverse process, which is perforated by foramen transversarum for the vertebral artery. Posterior spinous is bifid أو مشقوق إلى شقتين. This is a picture for the vertebral canal and the vertebrae and the intervertebral disc between them, showing the spinal cord within the vertebral canal, covered by 3 meninges: the pia mater, the arachnoid mater, and the dura mater. There are 7 cervical vertebrae. 5 of them are typical and 2 atypical vertebrae. When we call them atlas vertebrae, the first cervical vertebrae called atlas, the second one called axis. All cervical vertebrae قلنا بيهم foramen transversarum, foramen transversarum at the transverse process for the passage of vertebral artery. The sacrum consists of rudimentary vertebrae fused together to form a wedge-shaped bone, which is concave anteriorly, articulate with the 5th lumbar vertebra superiorly, and inferiorly articulate with coccyx. Laterally, it articulates with the iliac bones. Coccyx composed of 4 vertebrae fused vertebrae to form a small single triangular which articulate with its base with the sacrum. This is the picture for the cervical vertebrae and the sacrum bone, which is formed by 5 fusion of 5 sacral vertebrae. This is a lateral view for the sacrum, and this is the coccyx bone. Joint of the vertebral column at أول واحد عندنا, the first one is atlanto-occipital joint, وهذا هو synovial joint with capsule. It is between the condyle of the occipit and the atlas vertebra. It had anterior atlanto-occipital ligaments. The movement in this joint عندنا head extension, flexion, lateral flexion possible. Atlanto-axial joint between the atlas vertebra and the axis vertebrae, there is a ligament and capsule. It is a synovial joint. Movement of this joint is extensive rotation. The other vertebrae articulate with each other by means of cartilaginous joints between their bodies and synovial joint between their articular processes. The joints between 2 vertebral bodies, the superior inferior surface of the bodies of the adjacent vertebrae, are covered by hyaline cartilage sandwiched between the plates of cartilage is the intervertebral disc. The joint between the 2 vertebral arch, these joints are synovial joint between the superior and inferior articular process of the adjacent vertebrae. The articular facets are covered with cartilage and by a capsular ligament. There are many ligaments, which is supraspinatus ligament, interspinous ligament, intertransverse ligament, and ligamentum flavum. In the cervical region, the supraspinatus and the interspinous ligament called ligamentum nuchae. Thole, we have the supraspinatus ligament and the interspinous ligament, the ligaments between the spines, called ligamentum nuchae in the cervical region. This is the picture showing the vertebral column with its curves. The curves in the cervical region, as we see in the picture, it is concave posteriorly and convex anteriorly. In the thoracic region, the concavity anteriorly and the convexity posteriorly. In the lumbar region, the concavity posterior and convexity anterior. Sacrum, concave anteriorly. This is the picture for ligaments which is found between the vertebrae, the posterior supraspinatus and the interspinous ligaments, the anterior and posterior ligaments, and the ligamentum flavum. The other structure which is very important in the vertebral column called intervertebral disc. The main structure that bind the vertebral body from C2 vertebrae to the sacrum. They are thickest in the cervical and lumbar region. It acts as a shock absorber for the loads on the vertebral column. Each disc consists وهذا الديسك consists يتألف من fibrous annulus fibrosus peripherally بالخارج. There is fibrous annulus fibrosus and centrally called nucleus pulposus. The nucleus pulposus is an oval mass of gelatinous material. Oval mass of a gelatinous material containing a large amount of water, small number of collagen fiber, and few cartilaginous cells. There is no disc between the first and second two cervical vertebrae and sacrum and coccyx. Function of the vertebral disc assist the extension, flexion of the vertebral column. It is act as shock absorber. Annulus fibrosus. This picture for the intervertebral disc. This is the peripherally was the annulus fibrosus, which is composed of collagen fibers, strong collagen fibers. And this is the nucleus pulposus in the center, which is a gelatinous material which contain fluid, water. To the intervertebral disc, as we know, this is the body of the vertebra, and this is the superior surface which covered by the hyaline cartilage, and this is the inferior surface covered with hyaline cartilage. The intervertebral disc is sandwiched between the two surfaces. We go to another subject in the vertebral column. It is the ligaments. As we know, الأنسجة الرابطة القوية, strong connective tissue in the vertebral column. There is the anterior and posterior longitudinal ligament. This is the anterior longitudinal ligament in front of the body of the vertebrae, and this is the posterior longitudinal ligament at the posterior surface within the vertebral canal. Nerve supply of the vertebral joint. We have, as we return back to the all the joints, all the organs of the body have to the intervertebral disc. Each joint, this is the body, had the nerve supply of the vertebra, by branches, and this is the superior surface which is covered by the hyaline cartilage nerve, and this is the inferior surface covered curves of the vertebral column. The intervertebral vertebral posterior concavity in the cervical region, sandwiched between anterior the two concavity surfaces. In thoracic region, or posterior concavity in the lumbar region, with go anterior to another concavity subject in the vertebral column region. It is the ligaments, الأنسجة الرابطة القوية, as we strong connective tissue in the vertebral column. There is the anterior and posterior intrauterine ligament. There is a one concavity which is anteriorly longitudinal ligament in front of the body of the vertebrae. After birth, this is the posterior, and after 1 year, the concavities the posterior take place within the vertebral canal. A nerve supply of the vertebral joint. We have, as we said before, all the joints, all the organs of the body have a nerve supply. Each joint had the nerve supply by branches from the adjacent spinal nerve. Curves of the vertebral column is as follows. Posterior concavity in the cervical region, anterior concavity in thoracic region, or posterior concavity in the lumbar region, with anterior concavity in the sacral region. As we know, the fetus within during the intrauterine life, there is a one concavity which is anteriorly in the baby, in the fetus. After birth and after 1 year, the concavities take place as